Robin Phillips, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and happy to have this wonderful conversation with you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So your napkin, which you shared, which is persistence. There is always a way to overcome and reach your goal. Why did you share that message with me?
It probably goes back to probably my childhood of I don't like to be told no. Now, I mean, I respect boundaries, and by nature, you can do all the assessments on me, and I'm a rule follower by nature, by all means. And I also have this kind of sense that if there's a way to push towards another response to help accomplish a goal, and not for myself, but for the work that I do and the difference our organization and myself makes for kids, then I'm going to push and be persistent to get to another side. So.
Yeah, I like how you said there's a way to push to
Mhm.
another response.
Mhm.
That's very carefully chosen, I think, for
Mhm.
you. Why do you
Mhm.
mean another response? Like, where did that come from?
Um, well, my mentor my entire life has been my dad, and my dad had a lot of influence in my life. And his background was always, was in sales, which I'm not in sales by any means, but I always know there's another answer, and pushing to get to that from a kind perspective and a selfless perspective to help people see something a little bit different. I kind of use the line, I'm sorry, that's really not going to work for me. I need to find another way to get to this outcome, whatever that might be. And again, I'm not doing that from a selfish standpoint. I'm doing it from a way of um, getting people unstuck in their thinking. I don't like a lid put on me. And so I try to help remove the lid from other people's thinking at times. Not always easy, but I try.
Have you always like I like I don't like a lid on what I can do, so I don't try to be pushy about it, but you try to remove the lid for other people. Um, has it always been that way for you, or did you learn
Probably.
that?
Oh, I learned that definitely. I am certified in Maxwell leadership, and that has been a significant touch point in my personal and professional life and personal development overall. And I didn't start embracing that journey until about 2014. So, well into my career of coming into a different phase of wisdom, a different phase of leadership. And that lid thinking is a Maxwell reference. um, I work in a very political environment with state government funding and local government funding, and so there's a lot of bureaucracy in that world, and so I have to find other ways to get around that. And so I've had to expand my toolkit and put other tools in my toolbox to rise up and find other ways to communicate. So I'm still adding value, but I'm influencing and making a difference in communities or for people.
Yeah, I wondered about the lid and Maxwell leadership
Mhm.
because it is terms that are well aligned there. But I find it really interesting. So think about it. I mean, I think that, in community work, right? So Childcare Aware of Missouri does a lot of work in the community with children, and you are reliant upon institutional funding from
Yes.
governments and pseudo government organizations, right?
Yes.
How do you bring that other answer? Because bureaucracies are really good at getting entrenched, right? So
Mhm.
how do you help move them to a different answer? How does that work?
Well, sometimes it doesn't work. And I, you do what you can to add value and influence decisions or help people think another way. And yet I'm not in control of the final decision, or, that person may not be in control of the final decision. Um, and there was a recent, you know, change of land for our organization a little over a year ago, where we were stewarding a contract and had been for 24 years. And it was a contract that we had to bid on. That's not uncommon. And we were not awarded it for any other reason other than our price was too high. but there was no price on the bid either. So I say all that to lay the land of I could have never influenced that decision to be different, but I kicked in high gear my entrepreneurial mindset and went and found other funding to keep doing something similar but better. Again, it goes back to I don't like to be told no. And so I couldn't recoup that same amount of money in a short period of time. So it led to us launching a new suite of services that we refer to as Childcare Keeps Missouri Working, to focus more on the lack of childcare and how it impacts our economy and workforce participation, and kind of change the narrative to speak to the business community and the economic development leader community, the legislator community. And it's slowly starting to take course, but it's that persistence of I know this is the direction we need to go. My team is all rowing in the same direction, and therefore, we add more momentum to that path to get where we need to get. So yes, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But when I know, as a servant leader, when I know it's the right thing to do to make a difference for people, I'm going to find another way, because that's what I'm called to do. That's what I've always been called to do since my 20s. And so you have to get creative and you have to diversify and think differently and be open to feedback and change.
So, I think that's really interesting when you really think about it. You lost a client, right? You lost a funder,
Mhm.
and losing that funder almost opened the door for innovation, right? And this
Oh,
is
absolutely, it
going
did.
back to
Mhm.
what, there's a way to overcome and reach your goal,
Mhm.
because the goal wasn't the customer, the goal was the service. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah, the service to the people and what communities and people are asking for, because I try to keep an ear to the ground. I might be running an organization, but it's super important for me to keep an ear on the ground and keep my feet in the trenches as well, to understand what's going on so that I can learn how to navigate or influence my team how to navigate certain directions. And that's a different way of thinking in the nonprofit sector. A lot of people who steward funds in a nonprofit are, doing things that the funder is telling them to do, which is fine. You should. You have to be accountable and be a good steward of that. And I'm also about, okay, how can I diversify our revenue and diversify our funding so that when I retire, I have some legs to my legacy and things keep continuing beyond, and that we don't get complacent. Complacency is the opposite of persistence, in my opinion. You get complacent and stand still and you just, kind of check marking things. I don't work that way. I
Mhm.
want to, again, make a difference. And somehow it's not about me. It's not about our organization. It's knowing that directly or indirectly, I impacted the lives of children through a variety of ways. And that's what helps me sleep at night.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, is staying focused on the purpose. Now,
Mhm.
this is three times, and I think it's really interesting. Three times that you talk about encountering that challenge of funding, and that's when you brought up team, team, team,
Oh,
aligning with your
yeah.
team, checking in with your team, working with your
Mhm.
team all rowing in the right direction or in the same direction, the new direction.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me that you evoked your team when you talked about the challenge. Talk about how you engaged your team did you engage your team as it
Mhm.
relates to that challenge and brainstorming and finding other way?
Oh,
What did
absolutely.
you do?
I mean, well, so one, an organization is never successful on one person. It takes the entire team and even the people in the accounting department behind the scenes. And so I've always thought that way. And I've always been as transparent as possible with my team, even in hard times. And so we just said, okay, you know what? We're gonna take the high road here, and we're gonna view this as an opportunity to make a difference. Let's go into the conference room where we have massive glass walls, and we're gonna sling ideas, like sling out, like no idea is a bad idea. And there were about 10 of us in that room, and like massive, like an entire long wall of glass boards. I don't know the exact dimensions of that, but it was a lot of space, and that space could have been empty or that space could have been robustly full, and it was robustly full. And I'm like, okay, like this is a good thing. The team is generating ideas. It's stuff we had talked about but didn't really launch it due to capacity. And now it's like, okay, we either stay stagnant and lose some of our service delivery and focus on other things we have, or we continue focusing on what we have and we launch something new that we know will help the people. But it's gonna be a bit of a startup. It's like a 3 to 5 year startup that we've launched inside of a almost 25-year-old organization.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and
And
and got our board involved in that too, right? Had to be transparent with the board and engage them to help us with the vision and help us with the forward momentum of it. So we've been very blessed in that realm.
so a lot of organizations like yours, community organizations, charitable organizations, um, have been faced with similar challenges. And it
Mhm.
reminds me of a great paper napkin we had from Genevieve Patero, who the founder of the Pajama Project. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but episode number 176, she talks
Okay.
about it's not the power of one that changes things, it's the power of one another that moves mountains and people. And that's very similar to what you're talking about. This is what
Mhm.
you needed. You needed everybody to come together and move the mountain, right?
We did. And I have a colleague in another state, and we do some similar work and we do different work, but we check in with each other like every 6 to 8 weeks because we have the same energy and we kind of energize one another. And he's very well aware of this transition our organization, a portion of our organization has been going through. And he gave a really nice compliment to me recently about how whatever I must have done, how it influenced the staff to move their thinking from just, the check mark, right, of doing the service we'd always done to really thinking of it from an innovative level, almost a sales kind of level, and how to broaden the reach to communities and populations that we hadn't been engaging with. And that takes time, right? That's a behavior change. It was shifting the mindset of my staff and helping them understand that just because we might be charging for a service now does not mean we don't care about the people. We just have to get this launched and demonstrate and collect the data to show the value of it, and then kind of establish a pilot, if you will, so that we can go find other funding for it. But we have to start somewhere to collect the data to build out the framework of it. And it took some of my staff a little bit longer than others, but like I can tell you solidly now we're little over a year past that change. And like people get excited about it. My team doesn't work in silos. I don't want them to work in silos. So like when they have good ideas, I'm like, bring them up. Let's talk about it. Is this not working? How do we step back and reassess? We might fail the first few times, and that's okay. Because how else are we going to learn? We've got
Yeah,
to
I
try.
love it. And I love how you call that slinging ideas around earlier on. Like that's just a great visual, right?
I mean, it is. It's just slinging stuff up, and you see what makes sense and what's possible.
I think it's really interesting that you almost talked about how sometimes in the service world, right, in the community service world, charging for a service is seen as a bad thing.
Mhm.
You don't seem though, and you've used the word entrepreneur more than once. I love that you feel that you are one because you certainly are. It's neat about people in your position that they are reluctant entrepreneurs, aren't they? Reluctant about charging for a service or seeing value in a transactional service as part of the community good that you do. Um,
Right.
was that a big leap for you, or was your dad as a mentor a big part of that?
Well, my dad, and God love him, I just lost my dad in July.
Oh,
And he, influenced a lot of my thinking and helped me get unstuck on certain things because he was a great sounding board. He wasn't specifically giving me input on that service. It was really my team and sitting down and going, we know this is what people are asking for. Nobody's funding it right now. Like you can't just point blank go out and ask for a couple $100,000 without some sort of proof that it works and that it's needed. And I'm like, we have to cover staff time like right now. So the fee getting charged for the service isn't because we're sitting over here rolling in the dough by any means. We're like, it's maybe even a break even when you think of the cost of the service we're providing to cover the staff time and the infrastructure to deliver it. It's really a break even point, and that's part of the business plan we built out on these new services that we're charging for, is how do we then get on the other side of that to where we are making some revenue and perhaps use that revenue to subsidize something else or reduce
yeah.
that fee, right? But I've
I
got to start somewhere, and I've got to get the kind of the case study, if you will, so that I can show some ROI on that investment and make sense of it and show the value in it and how it's making a difference and get to the outcomes of it.
yeah, I love that. It's almost like a use case in a
Hmm.
technology sense, right? You're creating a
Hmm.
new vertical. Um, I mean, since 2020. a lot of charities have struggled. A lot of
Yeah.
organizations, especially in the childcare space, have really struggled.
Yeah.
Um, Work from home and all these displaced work environments and all this kind of stuff. How important is it in the new economy to have access to childcare? Like it's you must see that firsthand
Oh,
as a stop of growth. I mean, women not
mhm.
entering the workplace because they're staying at home, or a parent,
Right.
predominantly women, staying at home to
Right.
take care of their child is a chokehold on the economy, right?
It's a chokehold on the economy. It's a lost opportunity for wages being reinvested in a community. You reference, the mom who's typically the person in a two-parent family that's going to stay home and be the primary caregiver. Um, there's missed opportunity for building a retirement fund. There's missed opportunity maybe in benefits because maybe one parent's employer provided better benefits than another. I think when you think of diverse, or lower income or equity issues. There's wealth building inequities for people. And yes, that all ties back to the barriers of participating in the workforce, and childcare is a huge barrier. So is transportation, so is housing, but childcare is my lane and my understanding. And I intentionally in the last 2.5 years inserted myself, and someone helped open the door for me, don't get me wrong, and I'm forever grateful to her. But I had been talking about how childcare and economic impact went together for years, since like 2008, when some initial research came out, and everybody just kind of, okay, well, yeah, whatever. They're just babysitters. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, all right, yeah, okay, sure. Fast forward to COVID, which pulled back the curtain on all the dysfunction in the infrastructure of childcare. And now you have a lot of non-traditional people, if you will, legislators, business leaders, economic developers, who now get it. And they're at least talking about it and trying to figure out ideas. Getting private companies, employers, philanthropists to pull the trigger to invest differently, and viewing childcare as a community wellness issue is a very hard mindset to influence. Missouri is a very conservative state, and it's hard sometimes to move the needle in helping people understand how childcare is impacting workforce development, therefore economic development. And that's where that persistence comes in. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, help me understand your angle, and then I want you to understand mine. And having a conversation and building relationships with people to build that trust and rapport, and helping them see the narrative from a different point of view. It may not move them, but if I can at least get to a point where someone will hear it from another angle, and how there is data to back up the case that it is workforce development and excuse me, economic development, then what I do know for a fact is communities I have been, because we're a statewide entity with a statewide footprint, have always been since we were incorporated. But getting into some of these smaller communities and building that trust with people, and those communities emailing me back going, oh my gosh, you finally got the fire lit that we needed to be lit. Now, maybe I was just the 10th person to address it, and so they heard it differently. Maybe I was the first person, but when you can bring that vision and that passion and that influence to get people to move, or you're just going to say you're saying the same story a year from now, that gives me like satisfaction to know that I'm inspiring communities to talk about it differently and look at it differently, and perhaps take action.
Yeah. You know what I always say is that if it's always the straw that breaks the camel's back, keep on adding straws. Doesn't you don't have to lift heavy, right?
Right,
Just
right,
just lift, just
right,
act, just do
right.
something. I really like how you said that, help me understand your angle, which goes back to what you said at the beginning, push for another response.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I just want to, that is sales. You
I
said you're
know, I
not a
know it is.
salesperson, but you're so
Well, I am
channeling
a
your dad, right?
salesperson. Yes.
It sounds like
Yeah.
he was a relationship salesperson
Oh,
who built relationships, not transactions. And it
right.
sounds like that's what you're about, right?
No, that's exactly right. I just don't lead with saying that, because it's kind of like doesn't really go together with leading a nonprofit, company. But it is. I mean, the work I do in the political space, which is not always where I want to be, but sometimes where I have to be. the work I do with my team, the helping communities understand how to think of something different. I'm serving as a resource expert for the 2024 legislative retreat next month. First time I've ever been asked to do that. And if
Wow.
I can just provide another perspective or an additional perspective or the data that says, hey, you should really step back. That is all sales. It's all sales because
Yeah.
you're influencing, and yes, relationship based. You cannot, and I'm old school, so I don't like to go back and forth on email. In fact, we're facilitating some work in a small community outside, about 3 hours outside of St. Louis. And I went to the funder and said, listen, you've funded us to do all these Zoom calls, and that's great and that's wonderful, and we'll do that. But I need to get into that community and sit with these people eye to eye. I need to feel their energy. They need to feel mine. That's the only way we can work towards building trust and rapport to keep forward momentum. You just can't do that on Zoom.
I love
You're
how
asking
you use the
people
word
to
trust.
invest money to solve a problem, and you can't just do that in a cold call, you know?
Yeah. I love how you use the word trust because,
Mhm.
Jack Daly says that sales is the transfer of trust, and and they only know that when you do what's right for them, even if it's not you. And
Correct.
I think that that's what you're talking about, and that's what's really
Mhm.
powerful about your message, and how you approach it. When you think about your how you found your calling, right? I mean, you're very passionate about this. You said you found it in your 20s. How did you find it?
Mhm. I'm a faith-based person and had a lot of conversations with myself. And I think, granted, is my level of self-awareness different in this phase of life than it was in my 20s? Absolutely. But I think I've always had that kind of self-awareness. And I think that's a common thing. I don't know if men go through this, but I know I did it in my 20s, I did it in my 30s and my 40s, and we'll stop there. But it's kind of like, am like just having those conversations and asking for guidance and asking if I'm going the right direction and am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I've had a lot of, for me, a lot of God wink moments in my personal life and my professional life that continue to validate that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So it was just kind of more of an aha when I stepped back and had that initial conversation in my 20s. I was a young mom and I was using childcare, and I had just started my career in a nonprofit in North Carolina that impacted children in the 0 to 5, ages 0 to 5 space. And so I was just kind of like, I know this is what I went to school for, child and family development, but am I doing the right thing? And it just kept telling me, yes, keep doing it, keep pushing. And so in that first year at that job, I got promoted to like the admin team and went from being a direct service delivery person to then all of a sudden being responsible for the $5 million being invested in that community. And it just, again, was just a moment, another touch point that said, keep doing it. Like you're going to continue to make a difference in the system that impacts people and children.
That's amazing. So when it gets hard, how important is, you know, your value, your belief in your purpose, your higher calling? I mean, is that what keeps you going? I mean, because again,
It will.
2020 and beyond has been tough
It's
for
been real
organizations.
tough. It's been real tough, and I've personally been through a lot. I mean, we all carry stuff, right? And I when I became CEO, I had been in this organization for 10 and a half years and left for a few, and then came back as CEO in 2017 and lost my second spouse to cancer a year later and was his hospice caregiver. So, and then, trying to turn the ship around of this organization and get the culture back into a state that was where people felt valued and not worthless, that they felt valued and important and heard. So working on all of that and just navigating, and then COVID hits, or kind of pre-COVID, right? Because nobody really knew what was going on, but it was like all of 2019, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to balance, and it's so important that for me, that I'm doing things to take care of myself because I can only give what I have. So if I allow those personal things or these work things to drain me, and they do, but I'm self-aware enough now in this position that I have to step back and kind of check out I kind of refer to it sometimes I need to put myself in timeout to recalibrate so that I'm good to me and that I'm good for other people. And it makes me, and then my Maxwell training and staying engaged in that and understanding, taking nuggets of personal development from a variety of people so that I'm the best, CEO I can be. I'm the best coworker I can be. I'm the best, daughter I can be, the best friend I can be. And I do that for my staff. We make a lot of investments here in our staff on the personal development journey to help them rise up and see they have so much more to bring. So it's going back to removing that lid. If I'm going to stay here, then that's where my staff will stay in my team. But if I keep rising up, then I can bring my team along with me and hopefully, reverse that and put the team at the top.
Yeah, I really like that. It's not normal for community organizations to invest in their teams the way you talk about it. I love your idea of personal timeouts. That's really powerful, but you're also intentional about building a forum of peers, right? You have
Mhm.
your colleague in another state that's doing similar work and you check in with
Mhm.
each other. Is this something that is scheduled, or is your personal timeout just something ad
No,
hoc?
it's that self-talk of, okay, I feel myself getting frustrated, losing my sense of why. And so it's like I just tell myself, okay, like I'm sensing, my energy is different, my anxiety is a little more increased, and it's like, okay, I need to recalibrate because I'm responsible for the energy I bring in a room, period, whatever room that is. And so if I'm not owning that and facing and having a great, I need a support, and I have a support system outside of work. I don't need to dump all that stuff on my team. That's not for them to carry. But I do have a lot of different places. I have an executive coach, I have colleagues and mentors, and I have people who do work like me in other states, and just being able to talk that out and just get recalibrated, or just getting outside and moving and being in nature for a minute to be grateful for what is going well. And again, kind of reset.
Yeah, I really, you're very intentional about a lot that you do, Robin, and the work that you do is so important. I always worry about people that carry the load that you
Mhm.
do, for example, in community organizations, that are they getting the support? Are they
Yeah.
feeling supported? And it's amazing that you've built this support system for yourself. Um, Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.